A little of what you saw was actually
Want to.
film, which is not to in any way criticize Eliot and his film. I mean, it's a long, slow process making a film, but a lot of it wasn't used finally, including almost none of the talking of the actors was used.
Anyways, first of all, thank you again for coming, and I truly think this is an exceptional film capturing a rehearsal process. I think it's one of the most convincing ones I have seen, independently, that it's about your work. So I think it really gave us an insight in your mind, or how the mechanics, how it works. Often it's like a car. People look at a car, you see the outside and the beautiful colors and the streamline, how it's designed, but actually what makes it run is the motor and the mechanics. And I think this was a real look inside. So is your work, are they secret messages from other dimensions?
Is my work secret messages from other dimensions? No, from secret messages from this dimension. That's the point.
To tell me more, this dimension.
Well, it's a secret. No, obviously I've never, from the beginning I said, stories hide the truth, which I've always believed. And so I've always rejected story, because I thought that following a story leads you so that, what comes next, and you're looking towards a potential end of the story. Whereas what is real, the operative thing in life and in the spirit and in the soul, is what is here vibrating around you that I can't see most of the time. So stories have to be avoided so that you have a chance to relate to something else that's going on. That's sort of a cliche, but that's what I've always believed. What can I say?
No, it's...
And that's one of the reasons that I shifted to decide to make film, because I spent years struggling with the physicality, the present physicality of the theater, which I felt was the strength of the theater, of course. The three-dimensional, concrete, wooden, flesh, light reality of the theater. But at a certain point, I decided that I just wanted to be able to edit the material even more than I could in the theater. Because I'm looking for my pills that I have to take. But I felt that the theater, even though my theater had been about editing a lot, I felt the need to be able to radicalize that by making film. And to increase the texture by working in digital media, where of course you can change all the imagery and make it grainy, make it this, make it the other thing. Because one of the things that I tried to achieve in my theater for many years with the famous string and the plexiglass in front of the stage was to try and evoke that kind of graininess, that shaking thing that's always in front of your eyes. Like right now, I'm looking at these lights. Well, it happens that the lights are in my eyes, okay, as they were in the audience's eyes in the theater. But all of that was to create that feeling that between you and the world that you're dealing with is really a whole sea of phenomena that usually you suppress, that usually you don't notice because you're so involved with the ongoing story of your relationship to other people and what you're trying to achieve and how you're defending yourself against them or approaching them, blah, 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 which is daily life. Not very interesting.
No, I think it is actually quite to the point. You actually stopped writing for the theater.
Oh yes, I don't have anything to do with the theater anymore. Yeah.
What was the moment that you decided?
Oh, well, of course, it was kind of gradual. First of all, I made theater for 43 years, more than that if you consider that I started in grade school. Mm-hmm. But professionally, I made theater for 43 years. And for most of that time, I had a love-hate relationship to the theater, because in many ways, I didn't like the theater, and I was kicking and screaming. But at a certain point, I used to, my plays would open, and I was a fairly neurotic person in relation to, will it be a success? And I must admit, when my plays would open, when I knew that the review was going to come out in the Times the next day, I'd be nervous at night, and I'd get up early in the morning and go get the newspaper. Oh, look, he loved it. Wow. Oh, it was going to change my life. Everything's going to be wonderful. Of course, it wasn't. But that was my reaction for many years each time. At a certain point, about 5 years before I stopped making theater, I noticed, well, I didn't notice till much later, but about 5 years before I stopped making theater, I would go, the play would open, I'd go next morning, paper, oh, thank God he didn't say it was shit. Now that's a different reaction. And I began to think, well, I'm not so excited that it's a good review. I'm just relieved that it's not a bad review. And that sort of clued me in that maybe something was wrong, and I really didn't have that much interest in creating theater anymore. I had always been much more interested in the aesthetic of film, in reading about film. I mean, I was never interested really for many years in reading books about the theater, but I read everything I could find about film, even though I thought I was not a filmmaker. So it just all snowballed into the decision to try and make a film, because I was led to that by the fact that the last three plays I did in my theater had filmed backgrounds. Some of you may have seen them, big screens, back of the stage, with sort of bas-relief, slowly moving tableaus on the screen, the actors not really interacting with it, but proceeding in counterpoint to it. And I had this deal where I and the woman who used to run my theater, we went around the world. We went to like 9 countries, filming all of this stuff. And when the last play like that was done, I was sitting there in rehearsal all day, and I just noticed that here are the actors, or you're the actors over there, and they were doing these things. And I just noticed that more and more I was just staring at the screen all the time. The actors were down here doing things. So at a certain point, I just thought, well, maybe I should just try and make a film, which I was scared of doing because I had made a film back in '76, and I felt it was too theatrical, and I thought, well, I can't make films. But making these videos for the plays made me think that, especially with a video, where I could edit everything and I could do everything myself, maybe I should try doing it. Well, I started out trying to do it, and I had material from one of these countries, from Germany actually, and I worked on editing it for about 1.5 years, and at the end of 1.5 years, it just didn't work. And I just said, I gotta throw this out and start again with something else. And I did. I started with material that is this material that we shot in Buffalo. And at first, again, it just wasn't working, at least in my terms. And then I thought, well, I'm trying to neaten it up too much. I'm trying to make it controlled and what have you. Through all this film, I mean, you got the idea here. The way I worked was that I was telling the actors what to do all the time things were going on. So I said, well, why don't I just use all the mistakes and all the me quietly in the background saying, Marie, hold your hand a little higher. Yeah, that's it. Do this. Sort of as a burble in the background of the film. So the film was the activity of this thing seething into being. And doing that, which was radically different from what I'd been trying to do with film, which was to make neat, clear, tableau-like things that proceeded slowly. well, I thought it worked. I thought it worked. And that's how I began making film.
Yeah, I think it did work, and it was a film with a hidden story. Someone wrote it, that doesn't have a story. It actually also does have a clear story.
Well, sort of theme and variations, like all my work. I can't find my goddamn pills.
Well, maybe we'll give you a moment. I'll hold your mic. I'll have a look.
But I can talk loud.
Yes.
Go ahead.
They must be somewhere. Well, I wrote on during the day to some of the lines of some of your work, and I just, since you as a filmmaker here, also would like to throw them a bit back at you. Once said, "Would you prefer an image or an explanation?" I think it was in an early one, and I
really
Does that? Would you prefer an image or an explanation?
Neither. I prefer an ongoing rhythm. I would not prefer either an image or an explanation. I'm interested in films increasingly because I think that beautiful images are not the answer. You know? I mean, I fell prey to that. And indeed, when I was making films that I thought didn't work, I thought, all of it, what I've got to do is make these beautiful pictures. No, I don't think so. I think that it's a matter of articulating a certain rhythm that, on the one hand, as is always the case in my theater, is the collision of your consciousness with the world, but on the other hand, is trying to make some other alternative world grow and be out of that.
Yeah, I think this is perhaps the closest I could feel when I see your work in film, but also theater. One of the other sentence, I think it was in Total Rain, or another one was, I thought it came from a mysterious thought, but actually it came from an obvious source. So, but then you turn it into something mysterious. So this kind of using of ready-mades or what you find in the rooms. Is it alchemy? Do you think yourself as alchemist?
Oh yeah, that's an old. I mean, that was at the beginning. Yeah, I've talked about that. But of course, you've just. Well, actually, shooting these films, I shoot very fast. I shoot in 3-4 days. But then I believe that, almost like you're shooting a riot, right? But I believe that hidden in all that junk that you capture, look deeper, change the image, change the texture, change the rhythm, how it's related to other things, and slowly, maybe you make gold rise out of that garbage. I don't say that I have, I don't know, but that's the activity. That's the interesting, worthwhile, spiritual activity, which is what I'm interested in.
Yeah, and I think it is quite important to point out that he says he shoots in 3 or 4 days, and then he works 2 years, 3 years, or on editing.
Hopefully less and less. But I've been the one that I'm finishing. Hopefully now I've been working on for like 2 years. Yeah, but that doesn't bother me too much. You know, I'm reminded of Paul Valery, who I think was the smartest person probably in the last 2 centuries to talk about art, and he said that his idea was that, you know, people expected poems to be finished at a certain point, and he thought his poems were never finished. They were just stages on the way of creating this poem that he kept rewriting, and eventually he had to publish most of them, but they were never finished. They were just stages on the way.
Yeah, still, even though it was never finished, it's interesting to see it. I mean, for me also, how precise and detailed actually your instructions were to the actors, and this kind of freedom or expression they found, or this space that opened up.
Yeah, I always count. I mean, the instructions are very detailed, but I always count on the actors not really being able to do exactly what I say, and that's what's interesting. Yeah,
and I thought it was quite a combination of your theatrical experience and then going into the film work. Do you feel that you are starting out then in a way as the experimental filmmaker, or even so you make films since '75, since you say I now only do film? Is it a new?
Oh yeah, completely new. Something that I'm, struggle to make. That's why I have to That's why I'm working on them for so long, because I make them and I look at them and I think, oh my God, this is never going to work. I am no good. I mean, but then if you keep at it, and hopefully something happens.
Yeah, in your place where you perhaps close your eyes from reality, it's kind of a big, beautiful, loft, but darkish. Also, as was one of the quotes from also I think Total Rain. But you had,
it's interesting. You say close your eyes to reality, because I don't think you really do. But my favorite, I mentioned Paul Valery, but the other person that I've been reading again, who most serious art critics think doesn't talk well about art. But I, along with Godard, think that the greatest person talking about art in the 20th century was André Malraux, who stopped writing novels at a certain point and wrote these books about art. And I find his discussion of art and what the artist is doing the most profound that I know. And he says, of course, that the artist essentially is creating an alternative reality. And so I think that's what you're doing. I think you are, through rhythmical means in terms of the cinema, creating an alternative reality that connects with something that is more constant and always there, Because this life that we're all living day by day is this thing of bits and pieces that is not connected really with something else, and you create an alternative reality that tries to connect with something else. You try. Whether you succeed is another question.
Yeah. Well, this is a very profound a statement that I think that really is at the center of your work. In your loft, you must have thousands of DVDs and film versions. What artists do you admire? Which ones are close to you? You just mentioned, I've seen Godard, but still, who are artists who you feel close to that influenced you?
Yeah, I can say, but of course it changes. I mean, if you asked me that 2 years ago, it would have been other people. At the moment, I find the French filmmaker Bruno Dumont, very powerful filmmaker. An old French filmmaker, I hope I pronounced his name correctly, André L'Herbier, who made film loosely based on Zola's L'Argent, Money. I think that's an unbelievably great film. I don't know whom I'm forgetting. I mean, there are other people, but those are the two people I'm thinking about right now.
Thank you. Ella, do you have?
In your first film, Out of the Body Trouble, and in your very last, with Once Every Day, you work with students in new contexts, and you shot very quickly. And I was wondering the preparation process before that, like how do you approach your material in these new sets of people? And
the preparation process is not very interesting in a way. I mean, I know I have to shoot something, so the location is important. What kind of location am I going to be given? And given that location, up till now, I have taken images from painting, been using a lot of images of this Italian Renaissance painter, Longhi. Using those, each one of those images set in this location, that location, as the basis for, of course, doing something very different, but using that as the inspiration for the basic thing that's happening with the people in the scene. Then I used to write, for each scene, like 2 or 3 lines of dialogue that I would assign to 2 different people, and they'd be mic'd so that when as you saw there occasionally, I'd point to them and say the lines. I don't think I'll be doing that much anymore. As I said, in the film I made from that material that you just saw, I used very little of what the people said. And nowadays, I'm not interested in using practically any of it. I'm using voiceovers of different me mostly, but of different kinds, sometimes of other people. I love it when some people are talking foreign languages and I don't know what the hell they're saying, and maybe they're saying totally inappropriate things, but it sounds great to have these things happening. Now, I say that, but I'm also planning to use material from the film that I'm working on now, which was these long interviews, sort of, that I did with people. In other words, they would be given they would pick one phrase from a series of monologues that somebody else would write for them. And I would, in my deepest, most threatening voice, there'd be a pause, and they'd be sitting there at a table with two other people, and they'd pick the line like, I knew you would never sit there again. I'd say, did you pick that line because someone once treated you badly? The person would say, yeah. Well, yes. How badly? Well, anyway, we would go on and on and on. Sometimes they would actually break down and cry, which was great. But I'm thinking of making a film that only uses that material with certain other overlays. So I would use language, but it would not be language that I wrote. It would be language that was just generated. And then I'm making another film that was shot after the one I'm working on now, a film that was shot at my loft a couple of summers ago. And again, they had those individual lines, but I'm not sure that I'll keep any of them, because I thought that what I would do is take the stage directions, the printed version of one of these plays that had the film in the background, and I would just use the stage directions and talking about what the people were doing in the film, which would have no ostensible relationship, it seems, to what is in the actual image, but I'm sure that there will be things that will play with each other in interesting ways. And after that, I don't know what I'll do. I don't know.
So, for the mechanics, let's say you prepare a little bit for a film, you have the students, you have the actors there, you have some kind of a...
They're not always students, by the way. Not everybody.
Yes.
Not everybody in that film was a student.
No, not every. Yeah, they're great actors. You shoot for 3-4 days, then so you can then go home and have final cut. You sit. Do you have an editor, or do you do this?
No,
or?
I do it all by myself. I can't imagine working through an editor. The first film that I made, the film that you showed here, I worked with an editor, and I think I was led down the garden path in a bad way. No, but I mean, I can't imagine working with an editor any more than if you're painting a picture. I mean, it's true that in the Renaissance, great artists, I mean, Tintoretto or whoever would have other people paint parts of the picture. But today, Picasso doesn't have somebody, painting along with him in the painting. I can't imagine that. No, so it's the same thing.
So how many hours? You had like 400 or 500, or how many hours, or 200 hours of material? So, and then you really have it all in your mind, and then you combine the sequences and with the facts.
It takes a long time to get it all in your mind, of course. I mean, the first couple of months that you're working on it, you don't remember what the hell you have. It takes time to get familiar with it so you can really start making choices that make any sense.
And so in a way, one could say the film then listens much better to you than actors. I mean, the film will then do whatever cut you tell them. If the machine, the computer will do it.
Yes, but it shows up your own stupidity more also, because with actors you can blame the actors.
Or they correct it, yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of being talked about also now about robot theater, or working with computers and all that. Is that of any interest to you?
No.
Not at all.
No. Not at all.
Not at all. So the theater is behind you. So maybe we'll take some questions before we see the untitled. work, which will be about 15 minutes, you said?
15 minutes, yeah.
15 minutes.
And also be prepared. I hope that the sound is, I mean, I'm not going to subject myself to that, but the sound may be a little off at times, I don't know.
Yeah, but you just decided to which sound to use. What are you, John Zorn, or what?
Oh no, the sound. There's some music of John Zorn's, some music that I got from, well, I'm paying for it, of John Cage, and then there's a lot of talking in it. There's both. I decided just in the last week, I decided it was so lousy I didn't know what to do, so I decided to record a lecture that I gave when my stuff went to the library at NYU, and I gave this talk about what I do in the theater. And I'm using, as is made clear when you see it, that lecture as one level of the sound coming in and out, and the music. And then there are other statements taken from a wonderful book that I got permission to use by a man by the name of Leo Charney, who wrote a book about film called Empty Moments. And it's full of these sort of strange stream of consciousness, Dostoevskian almost, things where he's meditating about film and talking about last night Breton said to me when, you know, or, well, it's a combination of all these different things.
Should we show the film first and then have a discussion, or should we?
No, because I don't want to stay for the film.
Okay. So I'm gonna just do some numbers. So if you could put up your arm, so the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot. Yes. Can you take the mic, Norm? Thank you.
Richard, do you have a distinct audience in mind as you work on each film that is distinct from one another?
So little do I have an audience in mind that the big problem for me is now when this film is finished, I'm not going to go out and try to sell it. I don't know what to do with it. I don't care if anybody sees it. It's the making of it, and I really mean that seriously. Now, fortunately, I've been living happily with Kate for, over 40 years now, but my first wife, Amy Taubin, became probably the most respected critic of independent film in America. And she sort of pushed me and called up a couple of people and was responsible for the first film going to the New York Festival and the Berlin Film Festival. So, she's insisting she has to see this new film, which I dread, and maybe she will help me. I don't know, but I'm not driven to have these films seen by anybody.
Actually, is the 20-minute thing that we're going to see later part of the new film?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It's the first 15 minutes of the film, but again, it's not, the first 15 minutes are not, the edit of it is not finished,
Number 2.
Yes.
The one film that I saw with Paris and New York, I think it is, the actor and actress appeared in another earlier film, if I remember correctly, and it also had a dialogue, like it seemed very conventional.
You're talking about Total Rain, probably.
Right. And how does that compare, that convention with that long extended dialogue, to some of the other films that you made where you talk about that consciousness, and at the beginning of this?
No, that was different. This was very different. I forget why I made it, but it was sort of a true story where I got money to do something or other, make a film, and I didn't use the money to make the film, and I got very paranoid, and I thought, well, what can I do? Maybe I could film Kate and me going to Paris and talking about how we were scared that we were going to be put in jail because we didn't use the money that we were supposed to, and used it in a play instead of a film. And fortunately, they didn't come after me, but I decided, why not make that into a film? And I don't remember why I made it exactly. It was an anomaly.
Thank you. I'm very curious when you said stories hide the reality and that you were hoping to give another reality. Do you have a goal or any kind of an intention? You say you don't want to see the films and you don't care if anybody sees them. But I can't believe that, because when you said that you saw that the truth was, or reality was hidden, you must have some intention that you want to reveal.
Yeah, I want to get closer for myself to that reality. But I'm really quite serious that, I mean, the theater, yes, I wanted people to see the theater, and I wanted to be a famous theater director. I don't feel that way about film. I don't know.
Is it different as far as hiding the truth? One hides more than the other?
You mean theater or film?
Yes.
No, it all depends on the, no.
So you're doing it for yourself?
I think so. I mean, I maintained for many years I was making theater for myself. And I think I was, and I think every artist is making it for himself, first of all. But, I've just, one of the reasons I gave up the theater was I was just sick of that tension of people are going to see it, are they going to like it? I mean, in the 15 minutes that you're going to see, even, I talk about how I thought the theater was corrupt because I was always, worried about will people come, and in the beginning everybody walked out, and, they really did, and it really used to upset me, and I just, at the age of 78, I don't want to go through that anymore, really.
I appreciate your being here very much. And I have a little follow-up to her question because I'm still probing, if I might, with what you said. Is the issue in terms, there's so much emphasis on story, right? Everybody talks about how it's
horrendous. It's horrendous.
Yes, and it's manipulative in many ways, right? So my question to you is, do you feel, is the issue that people lie to themselves and to each other in terms of story, or is it that they don't reveal deeply enough? Can you just say a little more?
I think, well, of course, we all lie to ourselves. We all lie, full of that. But no, as I said, I think that stories hide the truth because story is goal-oriented. Period. And if you're goal-oriented, whether the goal is to make a lot of money, or to be famous, or to tell a story, or, that focus hides letting other stuff unexpectedly seize you. Now, I realize people are going to defend stories, are going to say, no, we're interested in a story that will have the unexpected, that will surprise you, that will twist you in certain ways. I don't buy it. I don't buy it, and I never have.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it seems to me that the process of you opening a show back when you were just doing theater, either told by you or told by others as each year a new show would come along, would often be the same, that, somewhere very close to opening there would be this sense of, this isn't right, this isn't done, and some sort of major change would get involved, and often that would be sort of a thing that also maybe made that show the thing that it needed to be. And I'm curious, by yourself now and just editing, without a date hanging over your head, without an opening night that's scheduled in advance, how do you know when you're done with these films? How do you decide when that editing process should stop? It seems that in watching the documentary of Once Every Day and seeing it earlier, that I recognize your theater in the documentary, right? It seems like a film of one of your plays. And the film is very much not that you've almost taken all of that out and left.
Did you see the film?
Yeah, this afternoon. Yeah.
No, I did, yeah.
So, what is that process like now for you? And how do you decide when to stop taking things away and what should be left? And,
Well, it's all intuitive. I mean, obviously, down through the years, I've written a lot of theory. But I've always said that making art is just intuitive. And it's just looking at it and thinking, oh, this is great. Wow, this is going to be better than whoever. And then the next day looking at it and thinking, oh no, this is so bad. And just going through that process again and again and again. At a certain point, you look at it, and I always used to say in the theater, I could tell when something was good because there'd be a tension in the solar plexus that wouldn't let up. And it's sort of the same kind of thing. The film now, I mean, I haven't had that much experience, but at a certain point, you can watch it all the way through and not think you look like a complete idiot. Really. Really. But it has a kind of even if it's loud, soft, whatever, it has a kind of on some level, it has an even hum. You probably noticed there was a hum going on through a lot of that documentary that Elliot made. Because what I used to do in those days, I don't know if I'll do it anymore, because I do expect to shoot some more, maybe this summer, I used a drone-like hum, specifically Elaine Redig, this French sort of composer, I shouldn't say sort of, this great French lady who works with long drones that she creates on machines. And actually, Elliot got into trouble because that's in the movie, and he felt guilty, and he called her, and he said, I'm doing this, and she said, well, I want $5,000. He said, I don't know. So I don't know how that's resolving itself. But there's something like that hum that has to be produced when I'm finally watching the film and it works. Because if it doesn't work, it's like, oh no, you know? It falls out of it that way.
Maybe one more question. In the early documentary, The Mind Flux, you talk about, or it talks about the Brecht, great work you did at
Yeah, I don't consider that a documentary. I consider that a puff piece.
Half piece, but you, I think you also talked about it in a way where the solar plexus perhaps was on tension, and so maybe tell us a bit about that adaptation of a story or how that worked. And
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Yeah, how is it is actually a story, the MacArthur story, the Threepenny Opera.
Yeah,
and you adapted it. And it,
I didn't adapt it.
I just made it work.
Did it? I tried to do it. But what can I say? I mean, I tried, like any director, I just tried to stage it. I got into trouble because Lotte Lenya hated it. She was very difficult. She said, oh, it's supposed to be funny and rayfish and so forth. And I thought, well, Brecht in Berlin, when he did it, yes, that was an appropriate way to throw back to the Berliners what capitalism really was, which was all these little crooks doing things and stealing people's money. I was doing it in this great white elephant pentagon of culture, Lincoln Center. And I thought the way to throw back to audiences what is going on now with capitalism in our country was to make a much more austere glacial production that echoed that aspect of Lincoln Center. So, that was my particular take on that show, but that's, any director would have a take on any show,
Yeah, no, I found it just so inspiring of all that, your own work for theater, the adaptation, all the reworking or repurposing, however I want it.
Yeah, whenever I did a play or, Moliere or whatever it was, I tried to do the play. It's like Cocteau said, if you want to be really avant-garde, just try to do a thing in a very classical fashion, and your own idiosyncratic nature will or will not make it experimental. So I always just tried to, when I did other people's plays, do what I heard in the text, in the language of the text.
Well, this is great advice for any director in here. So you listen to the original words and sound, and that's
more than listening to the characters and the story-like intention of the characters. Now, of course, you have to pay a certain amount of homage to that, but more interesting to me was in Buchner, for instance, the rhythms, the sound of, in translation, of course, the text. The language that was being spoken rather than the thrust of the character. I had an interpretation of the character also, but that was not as important to me. I mean, I would not tell the actors that was important because they would say, what the hell am I supposed to do with that? So with the actors, I would give them the things they were used to in terms of what their motives were and so forth. But for me, when I was making choices of how to stage it, of what kind of set I would make, and how I would block the play. It was more listening to that language.
Yeah, that sounds so simple, but it is truly quite a significant approach and something to really keep in mind for any director. Tell us, maybe if we come to the film now, a little bit of context, if you want to, about what we're going to see. What is it? What do you want us to know about it?
Oh, I think I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I said that it had these different layers of dialogue, one of which I just added in the last week or so. So who knows where it will go from there. And I added John Cage only quite within the last week and a half or so. But what is the film always was based upon this book. No. The film was me taking my material that I shot mostly in Bucharest and just trying to organize that material and then taking the language and seeing where I could place it so that it would talk about making art. Because really, it is a film about making art.
So maybe tell us, what book is it, and what was the location in Budapest where you filmed it?
We filmed it in, I don't know, that main street. There was something that was, some sort of, what do they call it? It was like some sort of organization of 20th century culture. And there was just this series of a couple of rooms with a lot, I loved it, with a lot of great big easy chairs and couches and heavy stuff that people could sprawl on and have different relations to. It was also a little bit shot in Denmark and a little bit shot in Zurich, but mostly it's Bucharest. And again, you know, I never cast these things. I tell the people who have invited us, get me, 15 actors. I don't care. And so I would get these 15 people, and I would see the
Romanian actors then.
Yeah. And I would see the locale, and I would just, I always say there was no improvisation in my theater, but in film and in the theater also, yes, there's a lot of improvisation, and I'm the one that did it all, because I used to tell the story, some of the way Chaplin used to work. I don't claim I'm a Chaplin, but there's that famous story of Chaplin where, there was one scene, and it was a big stairway in a room, and he looked at the rushes, and all of a sudden he said, look at that. Look at that actor. Look, he ruined that film. He ruined that scene by turning that way. Now we got to reshoot the whole scene. And by the way, since we're reshooting it, can we move the stairway over to the other side? And can we put a big...
No, that is remarkable. So like a Zen master, in the moment you do something, what you see, and you combine it, and then give through your alchemistic editing on movie magic software, then the touch should. But tell us the book. What is the book that inspired?
Oh, it's called Empty Moments. It's by a man by the name of Leo Charney, who wrote this one book published by Duke University Press. It has about 2/3 of the book, is no normal discussion of films and so forth. But 1/3 of the book are these strange monologues, where, as I said, he all of a sudden starts talking about being in Paris in the 19th century, and what Saussure said to him about film, and then what Bresson said, and blah blah. And he's obviously obsessed. He's disturbed about film, and this, that, and the other thing. So I just selected things from those monologues that sort of relate to film and sort of relate to making art. But again, I was very selective. I hope he's not too upset when he sees it. It's the only book that he wrote about film, and I couldn't locate him. I knew he used to teach here, he used to teach there, and I called those places, and nobody knew where he was. Well, online, I saw this thing, but I couldn't believe it. But it turns out it was true. He is now in the office of the provost at the University of Pennsylvania. So that's where I found him and called him up and said, hey, can I use your things in a film? And he said, sure.
Fantastic. And how did you find the book? How did it find you?
There are very few books, especially on that subject, that I have not found.
Good. So I think maybe we go ahead and watch 50 minutes no one else might most probably will see ever again. 15 minutes no one on this planet will ever see again.
Yeah, maybe.
So again, Richard, thank you so much, and it means a lot to us.